Thank you very much. Thank you all for your testimony, as disturbing as it is. It's important that this committee hear it and hopefully this Congress hear it. I've been involved with the attempt to protect children in out-of-home placements for over 30 years. And I guess I'm saddened by the fact that 30 years later, we still see this number of children put in these positions of jeopardy while the government looks on because of the patchwork and incomplete system that we have here so that we can have simple but vital information about these programs, as Ms. Brown has pointed out. You know, the last time this country witnessed somebody with a bag over their head and a noose around their neck, the world was horrified, the nation was embarrassed, and it was at Abu Ghraib. To be told by this committee that this is considered a valid therapy, I guess, or a practice by somebody in the care of somebody else's child, and that putting a noose over their head, around their neck, with a bag over their head, that this was acceptable, I think would horrify this nation again. But unfortunately, we don't have a picture of that. We just have the sad result of what happened to that young person. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that people would do this to somebody else's child.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. This is actually the second hearing that we have put together on this, and I thank the chairman for following through and his long work on this issue. Mr. Platts and I, when we had this hearing going back last fall, and we had the parents speaking and telling their stories, it was heartbreaking. With that being said, the legislation that was introduced yesterday, excuse me, to try to make a difference, as with anything down here, you know, we started hearing pushback immediately. And I find it hard, mainly because when we're trying to do something so that there are standards that children are not abused, I don't understand why there's a pushback. When we're looking at how possibly these schools or treatment areas can have some standards to take care of the children, I don't understand why there's a pushback on that. I don't understand, if you're dealing with children that already have some problems, why we shouldn't be doing background checks on those that, quote, are supposed to be helping them. So I have a real hard time understanding.
It'll take just a second. What we found at the case study level, too, is that a lot of the abuse and torture and things like that never gets reported to the states. That's just another point, that even if the states aren't reporting it, they're not getting it from the programs. A lot of the programs we looked at were cited for not reporting abuse, and most abuse maybe never gets reported in the first place.
Mr. McKeon will now be recognized for 15 minutes, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding. I want to begin by thanking all the witnesses for their testimony here today. I strongly believe that the instances of neglect, abuse, and death at these facilities that we've been talking about over the last few months are totally unacceptable and must be stopped. That goes without, probably should go without even need to being said. I still don't feel, though, that the committee has a full grasp on the extent of the problem or possible solutions. As you just said, a lot of these things are not even reported. So I'm glad this hearing has been convened today to learn more about these facilities and give members an opportunity to ask questions about them. Mr. Cooch, you talked about 8 instances of death. Has there been any prosecution on those deaths that you're aware of?
Yes, there was one case of a criminal conviction for third-degree assault and false imprisonment, and that person served 1 month. There was also a plea, but there was no time served. On all the other ones, there were no criminal prosecutions or charges.
So murder is okay now? I mean, how, listening to just what you said about it, I can't even understand how we don't have 8 people in jail for murder in those instances. How do you possibly not have?
I agree with you. It's very difficult to look at this and wonder why there's not more criminal aggressive effort in this particular case. There was a lot of civil activity, lots of civil settlements, but that doesn't fix the problem with the people who were doing the abuse. And the real issue, I think we talked about at your last hearing, these people are moving around, so who knows what program they've moved to next. And
but you have a
there's
death.
no trail then.
I mean, you know of a death.
Yes.
The police don't find out about it, or they just shrug it off and write traffic tickets, or what? You know, I mean, I just don't even understand this.
It may be that it's difficult to prove in a court of law. I mean, I can't really explain
To prove
it fully.
how the death occurred, or that there was a death. I mean,
There was clearly a death, and there was clearly abuse in some of the cases we looked at, and why there was no more criminal on that, I just can't explain it for you fully.
I just don't understand that. I have some questions I would like to direct at all the witnesses. Can you tell me how many private residential treatment programs or boot camps there are nationwide? I guess that's no.
I think it's safe to say the answer from our perspective is no, we don't know.
And so if we don't know how many there are, we probably would not have numbers to break them down by state. How many different types of treatment programs?
The records show the answer appears to be no again. Silence is helpful.
The answer is no.
Yeah, thank you.
How many different types of treatment programs are there in the country?
I believe that would depend on what they call themselves. That goes from anywhere from emotional growth, residential treatment, wilderness. I mean, there's so many different names that it's almost impossible to tell, because if we listed 20 names right now, there would be 21 tomorrow.
But, in a number of instances, we have students participating in physical actions, maybe abusive actions against other students. Can you outline that or tell me what you know about that, and then I'd ask the other two to respond from their experiences?
Yeah, we saw students being involved with abuse and torture of other students, typically at the direction of some of the staff or owners. But yes, kids typically be against their will being responsible for that and being told to carry somebody around, kick them, beat them, whatever the case may be. And we saw that last time, too, the 10 cases from last fall, the same type of things where kids were involved. In one of the programs, the actual staff were people who had been program participants. So they went through the program, and their qualifications to be the staff were that they'd been in the program.
Same was the case in my program. The students did actually have to physically restrain students. We had to chase them, bring them back. This was the first few times that a student would do it. If you had just become a senior member, you were told by staff, okay, you're a senior member, you should go and chase them now. And then after a while, it sort of becomes second nature. It's almost just, a reflex at that point, because you know that you're expected to do it. So
when you discuss wrapping students up in restraints, that was done by other students?
That was usually initiated by the faculty, but the students assisted. Like, the faculty would say, wrap them up, and then the students were the ones that were forced to do it. The faculty was then the one that would say, put them in the isolation room, and a student would observe. So occasionally, we would let the kids out of the blankets if we thought we wouldn't get in trouble for it, if nobody was looking, but it was something that, if anybody was around, we had no chance of doing.
Dr. Belancy, what's your impression of this?
Once again, I'm horrified. There is no justification for having youth-on-youth interventions like that.
Is there in I don't know what I would call a normal practice? I mean, is there a discussion of this within the profession of whether this is advised or ill-advised, or?
Yes, I think it's very clear in the profession that this is ill-advised and unaccepted practice. One of my comments as I was listening to what could be helpful, and what a parent might want to ask, I'd want to know whether or not, what were the professional qualifications of the staff. I would want to know if there's on-site medical involvement and oversight in an administrative capacity. I'd want to know what the training guidelines were for the staff. I'd want to know what the history of abuse claims were against the agency. In my state, you can find out more about a restaurant by doing a web search for their health standards. Then you can learn about these kinds of programs that are caring for America's youth, and that's an outrage.
I mean, I just don't understand this pattern of therapy where this much trauma can be activated within the family. I don't quite get this. I've never heard of.
It's an incredible story, actually. It was almost like a cult-like organization, and they brainwashed a lot of the parents, it appeared, from what we saw, and they became part of the process. And actually, kids were going home at night sometimes to other people's parents' houses and staying. And there was abuse going on in some cases at other parents' houses. So it was a very bizarre thing, Mr. Chairman, that there's a movie about it. Over the GW, it's called. I mean, it's just an incredible story. And this is one of the ones that accepted Medicaid money. That's how they were primarily funded, millions and millions of dollars for Medicaid. But the parents became kind of sucked into the program, and there were apparently split marriages and things involved because one parent might get sucked in, the other one didn't, and that caused pretty significant issues.
Mr. Coots, you have several times in your testimony this morning used the word torture. We've had some discussion about the use of restraints and,
Seclusion and restraint.
Seclusion and restraints. Could you comment on this and why you use the word torture?
Yes, I would say two things. Torture would be, for example, in case number one, where the boy couldn't walk, was having trouble breathing, yet they were forcing him to exercise. They were actually picking him up and dropping him on the ground as a push-up. In other words, he couldn't do a push-up. He was ready to die, and they were picking him up and dropping him on the ground. And I understand the last word he breathed was no. And so that's an incredible case. But you're talking about the human restraint here, too. And we saw human restraint in many forms. The ones that caused the death were typically the face-down restraint. And again, some of those were done contrary even to the program's policies and procedures, where there were either 3 people on top of a child or one, and one of the boys, in fact, had asthma, and the staff had not been told that, and they did a face-down restraint, and he died. Some of the other restraints were, it was called 3-point, 4-point, 5-point. 3-point being 3 people holding down limbs or the head. The 5-point restraint would have been 1 person on each arm, 1 person on each leg, and 1 person holding the neck or the head still, many times for hours. And so I would say that that's pretty severe abuse bordering on torture. I'm not sure what the distinction is between abuse and torture, but certainly I think that in some of the cases I would define it as torture, what we saw.
I just want to make sure that you weren't casually using the term. You're using it based upon the case studies that you examined.
Not just the case studies. Other kids in these programs had the same thing done to them.
Again, what bothers me is that, again, a fair amount of experience with a lot of these parents and families. You get to your wit's end with a very difficult child, and a difficult child that you've tried different alternatives to help, and with school districts and all of what it entails for some of the clientele of these facilities, and to then suggest things that just aren't based in fact, science, or otherwise, that this will all sort of come true, I really believe is preying, and in a very unethical fashion, preying on the anxieties and the stress that exists in these families. The repercussions of the families engaged in our first hearings, and I assume many of the families that had their children either abused or died in this hearing, repercussions within those families are long-lasting and sometimes very devastating for the adults who later find out maybe that they had participated in this and how badly they feel about it in some cases. In the earlier hearings we discussed in cases where they voluntarily had their children kidnapped from their homes and then realized that what had taken place, certainly when later the child was tragically killed in those programs. So the idea that this is a harmless intervention at many levels, I think is very dangerous for us as policymakers to consider. Again, we don't want to paint with a very broad brush here, but the fact of the matter is we're starting to see emerge here some programs that are very dangerous, that are very reckless with respect to the health and welfare of the children that they have in their custody, and they've got that custody, I think, under very suspect representations and conditions. to those families and to their parents. Mr. Coots, if I might, if I have a little bit of time left. These financial connections, we went through a long scandal here on colleges referring people to certain student loan lenders, and you might not have got the best interest rate, but here you have a referral service that may be financially connected, I assume through either fees or commissions for the referral of these patients. And so, again, you have no sense that you're getting informed, independent, ethical representations from the phone calls you made. Can you tell us about this or what you know about the financial arrangements that may create a conflict of interest?
I would say one case was worse than that. You had a husband-wife team claiming to be independent. One was the referral service, one was the actual program. We called the referral service 3 separate times as 3 separate parents with 3 very different kids, and each time we were referred to the same program, and it's because it was a husband-wife connection that was not disclosed.
But they hold themselves out as being independent referrals?
They didn't disclose that to us as the parents, so I don't know if they hold themselves out as that, but there was no evidence anywhere on their web or anything. They told us that, yeah, we're related to this program, and no matter what your problem is, we're going to put you to the same program, which appeared to be the reality of the situation. So and there were other issues where I think the referral services are certainly getting money in many cases from the programs for the referrals, and those are undisclosed types of situations typically.
Excuse me, unless you know that as a factor?
Yes, we have cases of that. Yes, absolutely. So the one was the worst case where you had the husband-wife, but you had other situations where you had undisclosed to the parents the referral service was getting money for each referral they made to the program, or a vacation, or there were other things like that they were getting paid. So there was a financial relationship between them.
A lot of these programs appear to have a 28-day or 30-day. There was a time, and I don't know if it's relevant in this case, where that was related to insurance payments. That you got an insurance benefit that sort of had a 30-day cutoff on it for mental health or treatment. Is that operative in this situation with respect to placement of these young people?
I don't know, but with respect to health insurance, we were marketed by some of the programs, one in particular saying that you might be able to get money back from your health insurance, but what they told us was don't tell them in advance, because I think the word was you'll be up a creek. So they said wait till the end. Well, most insurance programs require pre-approval for substantial disbursements, and so you advise a parent not to talk to the health insurance company, get them to believe they're going to get money at the end of the day. I believe they would be up a creek probably, because most health insurance companies, even for hospital stays, you have to get pre-approval for health insurance. So for something like this that's even possibly not covered at all by health insurance, to give parents that advice is very misleading.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No other questions. Just again, my thanks to each of you for your testimony, and Mr. Chairman, also to echo your sentiments on the abuse that occurs to the youth, the children in these programs, and also the psychological probably ramifications to the parents who are probably in desperate situations seeking what they think is help, and trusting others to be giving assistance, and when instead they're not, and the long-term consequences within the family dynamics of the abuse that occurs in these facilities. I think that's an important aspect of the oversight you're leading and the efforts to reform it. So, again, my thanks for your leadership on the issue.